Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's topic, which is on agentic AI. This has been the buzzword in intelligent automation in our world for the last several months. And as organizations are racing to figure out A, how to budget for it, B, how to conceptualize it across their enterprise, and then C, of course, find the monetization so that they can continue to prioritize and keep the lifeline, alive with use cases coming down the pike. It's important to talk about what this means as an orchestration layer, as something to think through, as a novice technology for some people who have started with automation, for folks who haven't started with anything yet. So there's several areas of inflection points and a lot of questions that have been coming our way and our partners' way. And so today's discussion is going to be using not only the Wonderbot's insight on how we've been leveraging agentic with several different technologies. We've also got Tim Dixon from Regal Rexnord, who's going to be joining us, Sangeeta from UiPath, who's been doing a lot of workshops with clients and helping them understand what agentic looks like, how to talk about it. And then our very own Cameron Linares, too, who's going to be joining, talking through how we're telling our clients about this, how they can add this, not only to think about it from a tech stack, but as a framework for transformation going forward with all emerging technology. So we've seen a smorgasbord of adoption and hype in AI. And what's interesting about this chart is that it represents the inflection points of new technologies coming along and their adoption. You see an interesting spike with AI-driven cybersecurity, because I think after Gen AI and some of these self-soothing and self-automating bots began to rise on the scene with AI, it was important to understand what those security measures were going to look like and the policies in place for AI. But overall, it was kind of a shoddy spike, and it really wasn't an adoption that you'd see scale. But if you look at it really from more of a linear perspective, you see that the milestones are really about the mentality. From the birth and foundation of what we call AI strategic patterns, the patterns that you use to get from point A to point B in an enterprise process, through to where we're at now, where AI is going mainstream in enterprise, and folks are trying to figure out how to agentify their current automations and agentify their organizations for a better throughput of humans and machines working together. So what is agentic? Well, there's a dictionary definition, but is that really factual? It's kind of a conglomeration of a bunch of analysts and practitioners and clients that are kind of chiming in and saying what it is. But overall, what we're saying here today is that agentic is the advent of machines, humans, systems, and people coming together to orchestrate the way that a process works end to end in an organization. And what's interesting is that as this concept continues to develop and evolve, and there's several opinions about what it is, what we've found is that the real power is in the transformative nature of understanding how all of these technologies work together. It's not talking about the tools anymore. It's talking about the transformation and the outcomes that we're hoping to achieve and scaling for the future. Because if you think there's a lot of .ai companies now, just wait till 5-10 years from now, as more startups, more millennials, more developers are getting creative with the different solution sets that they're building. And the orchestration and the high level view of this framework is going to be more and more important, especially with stats like this. Enterprises are doubling down on AI agents. So it's not going away. It's here in the mindset. But what you'll hear from Tim and what you'll hear from Cam and what you'll hear from Sangeeta today is that it's not full-blown adoption. We're simply figuring out how it is that we're going to insert this capability. And as it augments and becomes more commercially viable for more organizations, we'll have put the foundation down just like we did for RPA and every technology that came before this new advent. So how does it work? Agentic AI works by understanding and sensing the environment that it's in. So there's several terms that we've understood along the way: computer vision, natural language processing, but there is a level of perception and how these agents can interact and leverage information and reason back to understanding what it is that their outputs are supposed to be. So the happy path is made clear, a little bit more discernment. There's reasoning, processing information to make decisions. What kind of information are we going to have to feed it so that those reasoning decisions are categorical and can be understood and will be made in the way that a human would if they were discerning that as well. The planning, understanding how to achieve the goals, pathfinding, understanding what the reinforcement should be. Any practical applications such as forecasting all the way through to understanding what the workforce should look like. So really putting in kind of that mindset, the approach, the culture, feeding all the data points that make for the outcomes that a human would use to make a decision. And then ultimately taking the action, right? So agentic AI is really this amalgamation of understanding how humans, machines, and ultimately systems work together. The interesting part, and what you'll hear today from different perspectives on where people are in tech adoption, is that it works differently depending on what the use cases are and how it's going to interact and weave into the people. It's first and foremost about how the people work with agentic, and that's ultimately how agentic AI will work in the organization. So why is there such a buzz? I think for a long time, folks who have been in this space, and I think my colleagues will collaborate and contribute to this thought, but we've been stitching together technologies. With mergers and acquisitions coming into play, maybe there were some technologies that were already legacy. There's a lot of mainframes that, man, it was a bullhorse. Why would you ever change it? It worked, so there's a lot of different inflection points that are coming together. And really what we've been trying to do is stitch them together, make sense of it, find harmony, and I love the UiPath term for the new orchestration that Sangeeta will touch on later called Maestro, because that is a layer of orchestration. There's an elegance to the way that we're talking about technology now. It's not just, kind of stitching things together. It's really thinking, pulling back and saying, what are the features and functionalities that overlap, and where is it that an agent can insert themselves autonomously into this process? Where can I set it and forget it and truly understand and know and trust that those outcomes are going to be what my organization expects? Along the way, too, there's been several different ways that adoption has happened, right? And so being able to be adaptable to the technology that comes along has really been an important part of the conversations that are going on around agentic AI. Salesforce has agents. There's several different applications that have already had different versions of agents. And so really trying to get to that place where automation and AI, where reasoning and discernment come together, bots, if you will, whatever it was that you were calling your digital workers, automations of the past, how is it that we put it together, right? And so there were different ways of infusing, and now the agent is kind of that full package of coming together. There's even been pre-built agents, which Cam will touch on a little bit later in the discussion as well, that really just start to set you off on the right track with value being driven without even having to do the initiation that some automation programs could have left you with in the past. So how do you get started? And, there's several different ways to go about it. Many of you will recognize this from the Build About sessions from back in the past. But with the help of Sangeeta and some of the successes that she'll be talking about in some of these agent building workshops, really the practice is the same. Gathering folks together, understanding what the challenges are, seeing the viability with the understanding and awareness of what's possible in agentic, and then ultimately understanding whether these things make sense from a commercial perspective and are viable. Again, remember, while we are going to be talking about different places where organizations can start with this, your organization is unique to understanding this. And so this has been a really fun way of kind of maybe over the summer lull, having a team building activity, but having this session with a little bit of a lunch and learn is something that we're starting to schedule over the summers, because it's really giving folks a chance to do something hands-on and start to learn really about what colleagues are having challenges with in the organization that you may not even have ever thought of. And it's something that potentially agentic or automation or something else, one of these advisors would be able to point in the direction of a solution that's viable for your organization. And lastly, I'll leave you with this before I invite everybody along. While agentic is continuing to be an organizational trend that we talk about, the only way it's going to be an organizational enabler of transformation is the way that we put it together, the way communities like this come together, and how we start to talk about that. So we'll be sending the deck along as we always do. And with that, I'm going to invite my panelists to join me on the virtual stage. All right, fantastic. So thank you so much, guys, for joining. And very briefly in your, before we get started, I want everybody to hear from you, who you are, why you're here, and what we'll be talking about. So Sangeeta, I'll lead with the ladies. I'll start with you. Kick it over to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me here. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're from. I'm Sangeeta Ray. I'm a client success leader at UiPath, and I've been working with a lot of Fortune 100, Fortune 500 organizations from various sectors in designing and executing their AI and automation strategies. And I have been in the space for more than a decade now, the AI, automation, the process excellence. And it is just amazing how fast things are changing and the value it can impact. So really excited to have the conversation today with you all.
Thanks so much, Sangeeta. And Tim, not a stranger to our webinars. Thanks for joining us again. Why don't you introduce yourself for those new to the conversation?
Yes, and thank you for having me back. It's just been a few months or so, right? Just a few months ago, I was on my first Wonderbots and really enjoyed it and really enjoyed the engagement and obviously the post webcast follow-ups from the audience as well. So I appreciate that. Tim Dixon, I'm the Chief Digital and Information Officer here at industrial manufacturing company, $6 billion in revenue called Regal Rexnord, headquartered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In essence, we sell electric motors and engines to distributors and OEMs in the industrial manufacturing space. We've made some recent announcements that are pretty interesting. If you want to check out our website, we're doing some pretty interesting things with humanoids and a new partnership with Honeywell that takes us down a little bit of a different path. So some exciting news to come in that regard. But this is now my third company. I've leveraged UiPath, so a great partnership with UiPath. In the last year and a half, I like to think that we've gone nuts with AI, in particular, generative and agentic AI. I was brought into the company to prove that digital technologies like generative AI, agentic AI, and others can actually drive growth for a company like our size. And so we're on a mission to prove that these tools can be used and drive top line revenue for the company. And we have some use cases that we'll share in which we've done so in just a short period of time. So thanks again for having me. Can't wait to get into the dialogue.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. And Cam, over to you.
Thanks, Paula. And hi, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. I think I mentioned to this group earlier, but it's really exciting to see what Tim and Sangeeta are doing with the agentic AI implementations that they're doing. And, I kind of view myself as the boring one. I have to be the one who looks at how these agents and these AI technologies are being responsibly implemented, setting up guardrails and whatnot. For those of you who don't know, I'm a leader on our enterprise solutions team here. That can mean how we infuse our own tools with AI and agentic capabilities, but it also means working with you, our partners, our customers, our clients, to ensure that we are selecting the right tool for your needs. If it is AI, if it is an agent, that we are doing that correctly and securely with the appropriate safeguards to not jeopardize your business. So we go through this, really excited to discuss more what that means, where I find agents really exciting, but also maybe where they're not the best decision to make. So Paula, I'll throw it back to you to keep this going.
Thank you so much, Cam. No, so we have a really exciting group of people with several different perspectives of how this is. And I think it's important to note that we are at kind of the beginning. And even though we're talking about this, and there's several different places where this has been implemented, adopted, the population of MVP communities in the UiPath department, in the Blue Prism department of Agentic, in the Salesforce. I mean, that's what you see across the board on LinkedIn for developer jobs. I always peek at what that's looking like. It's kind of like the Microsoft, version of it as well, which we've been, certainly, staying up to speed on. So it's everywhere, right? Every single application you have has some form of an agent and some form of, an AI consideration to do. And so that's fatiguing for a consumer, so putting ourselves in the consumer's hat for just a second. And Sangeeta, you're just fresh off the Bellevue, Agentic workshop that UiPath hosted. As you work on the front lines with customers, as customer success, how do you introduce this concept? What is it that you do to typically advise them to start this journey, if they're on that journey? And how do you infuse the journeys in a way that it doesn't feel so cumbersome and clunky and overwhelming? And what are some of the things that you advise early on? And I think that's a great place to start with the discussion today.
Absolutely. So I think firstly, everybody's talking about agentic. So the interest level in our customers and everybody about agentic is very high. So essentially, the way we propose is taking it in steps so that they are making the correct decisions. So essentially, we encourage them to go in three main phases. The first thing is awareness. Many people still don't know what agents or agentic AI actually means. So the first thing we focus on in really creating that awareness, we kick off the things with a foundational session where everybody's aligned on what agentic automation actually means, especially for UiPath ecosystem, and what exactly it can do for their business. So we essentially talk through the UiPath strategy, the power of agents. We do some real world demos to really inspire the possibilities. And then we invite the participants, the business leaders, the engineers, the COEs to share what are their pain points, what are their current automations, which could potentially benefit from the agentic approach. And this really sparks the conversation. We set the stage, we align on the language, and that lights up the use cases. So this is all about awareness. And then we move towards ideation. That's where, after everybody is up to speed, we get into the ideation workshop, which is more of a very hands-on kind of a workshop where clients bring in their domain expertise, and we from UiPath bring the lens of feasibility, the value, and the agent fit. Does it really make sense to make an agent, or bots will do good enough as well? So together with our customers, we dive in the top areas of opportunity, we look at the industry benchmarks, and we start mapping out what's possible. From UiPath, we bring in the use cases as well to help accelerate the thinking. And then finally, we move towards the solutioning part of it. So that's where we all bring everything together, the people, the processes, the technology. We co-design the blueprints of how the agents, the bots, and the humans will all interact with each other end to end. And that's where it kicks off the pilot part of it. That session, the solutioning session, builds the clear and compelling pilot plan, including the success metrics, the operating model, and the vision for scale. So step by step, baby steps at a time, but looking at the big picture.
No, and I think that's so important because it is nice to kind of see the climb, see the view, where are we going and how are we doing it? And this is the question that always comes to mind. I'm always a cynic in this stuff because before I can explain it and sell it and help, guide it, from a storytelling perspective, I have to understand what the true impact is, right? And so Tim, you said that, your job, and I think, you've done a fantastic job checking off the box, is to prove that it's possible. Possible, we all know, right? We can pilot our little faces off all day long and show that the technology actually works, but is it valuable? I think that's the question that everybody needs to ask. Is this valuable to my organization? And is this something that I'm going to monetize and put in that makes sense, or is status quo okay? Because often what we find is the absence of a decision on an emerging technology or emerging concept like agentic is status quo. So Tim, how do you move the needle with showing the value? How is it that you kind of look at these use cases, and you shared a few with us, feel free to use, those as examples, but how is it that you discerned between all the different technologies that you have in your umbrella that you were going to try this out, that you were going to launch this, that this was the area that you were going to actually give this type of approach a go?
Yeah, so before I answer that question, let me just speak to the journey a little bit, because although we're very early days in AI, we're way early days in generative and agentic AI. And so what that means is that we're way early days in terms of how we're defining the value. And I think the value is defined in different ways. I think up until this year, if you were just doing traditional machine learning models in industrial manufacturing, things like cross-sell, upsell AI models, or product recommendations or demand forecasting, people would have said that the value driven from those traditional AI models will have aided or augmented someone's job in some way and made their decisions more accurate or better in terms of those insights being delivered. Fast forward now to generative and agentic AI, you have an awesome ability, if you leverage it correctly, to drive revenue for the company. And I don't think that was really possible with some of the traditional models. And so when you go to workshops like what Sangeeta is talking about here, you have to involve your business partners in the beginning of those ideation sessions. You have to get educated and bring everybody up to the same level at the same time, so that the expected value of whatever it is that you deliver from these bots can be identified in the beginning. and then they're more likely to champion and adopt it with you as those solutions get delivered. So I kind of quantify the value in a couple of different ways, either top line or bottom line. We deployed Rexy, which is our generative AI chatbot, about a year ago on our regalrexnord.com website. And as an example, in terms of the metrics that we measure users who visit the website, and we measure what they actually do within the chatbot. And we're seeing an increasing number of our B2B industrial distributors want to interact with a chatbot in that fashion. Traditionally, they would have called the customer service, hotline or the call center and asked questions and wanted various different documentation, but now they're going to Rexy. They're searching for documentation through the chatbot interface. They're looking for information on our products, our videos, content, and then they are buying. And so at the end of the day, we're making it easier for them to do business with us, and obviously we're getting some benefit as a result. So who would have thought a year ago that a generative AI chatbot in a B2B industrial manufacturing setting would drive top line growth for a company? And I'm here to say that we've done that. So check the box in that regard. That was a huge demonstration. But I think in this AI journey, if we hadn't started with traditional AI models, gone to and learned about generative, and now are piloting and deploying very soon here agentic solution, you couldn't have just jumped right to agentic. You have to go through those learnings. You have to go through those implementations, because then you can only really know how valuable agentic might potentially be for your company. So I'm glad that we've had that journey of the year and a half, because I think we can zero in on specifically what we hope to get through our 2 pilots with agentic AI here this summer.
That's awesome. So you're saying there's going to have to be a part 3 because we have more, more to figure out.
So I'm going to predict the future here a little bit, folks. And, I've mentioned these, in our digital house, we have all these chatbot kids, running around, Rexy and Ava and so on and so forth. I predict in a future Wonderbots webcast that we'll be talking about agent to agent communication. So we've not yet deployed our initial agentic AI solutions yet, but I can see there be enough agentic kids running around in the neighborhood that we're going to have to start talking about how they communicate with each other, how you hand off for one another, and how they all sort of play together in the same environment. So we'll hold that for a future podcast.
Sounds good. It sounds like they're going to need a camp counselor maestro.
Exactly.
So,
otherwise, it can be a real circus with so many wild kids running around.
Exactly. So Cam, turning to you, since you have the boring job, but I think also the boring job must be talked about, right? One of the things that with any technology, be it agentic, generative AI, even RPA, at its infancy, there's always the concern with when, connecting to our, infrastructure, connecting to our data, connecting to our areas that we need to be hyper protective. And there's often risk questions that come up for folks, in adoption. So tell us a little bit about, the security of agentic, why we have peace of mind, why we offer it, as a managed service. So a little bit about the peace of mind of how this technology, interfaces with data and systems.
Yeah, absolutely, Paula. And I think, as we dive into this, I really want to make sure we understand terms. Tim, you brought it up earlier, but there is really a difference between using the agent, using agentic automation, and then using maybe AI with RPA, right? And I think as we look at these different technologies and solutions, they're going to be applied in orchestration. We're seeing, our good friends at UiPath do that right now with their Maestro tool. We're seeing some other vendors come out of the woodwork as well. But it's really about how all these tools work together to deliver your solution. So with that in mind, and I'm going to, obviously our good friends from UiPath are on the call, so I'm going to, talk about them right now. We're seeing the advent of these platforms that are really focused on securing your data for the purpose of agentic and AI automation, right? Whether that's using context grounding for, abroad for semantic search and RAG and the different technologies they apply there, but UiPath's context grounding to bring your own data, to specialize these agents for how they act, whether it be applying different business rules. I know that might be in a preview right now. Don't know who knows about that one, but different business rules that are coming up to further direct your agents to the correct question or these future guardrail capabilities that are being implemented. These safeguards are being implemented, one, to reduce hallucinations, right? That speaks to the specialization of these tools, but two, in a way where, again, your data is for you. It's not being used for others. And while a lot of us want to run out and always use the most exciting next generation cutting edge AI, that doesn't mean it's the most secure, right? And we look at a lot of agile players in this space, and they're wrapping their solutions with the open AIs of the world. They're wrapping it with Anthropics, and these different APIs are available, and that's great. But the reality is you just don't know where that data is necessarily going without a true enterprise player backing them. I think that's where UiPath specifically, has really stepped up to the plate, really, pulled back the curtain and said, this is how we're managing your data. This is how we're managing the infrastructure that your data is sitting on. This is how we're doing it securely. Again, from both a training perspective, a guardrail perspective, and also an overall management perspective on access. If that's being used for any further training, it's not, newsflash, it's all just for you to use. So again, very important as we look at the space.
Thanks, Kim. And Sangeeta, when you're discussing the agentic future with customers after these workshops, maybe or along the way, what are some of the concerns that they express? And how is it that you overcome those concerns? What is the assage to that? What are some of the places, maybe if there's links that they can go to kind of read up on and give some advice? But how is it that you overcome those concerns, and what do they tend to be? So maybe some people can empathize on the call with some of the questions they might have and, feel silly to ask out loud.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think some of the common concerns which are on top of our customers is definitely the performance and the reliability of the agents. As Cam was saying, they hallucinate as well. So part of it is on the reliability and the performance of it. But then when AI agents can automate complex tasks, developers find that human oversight and collaboration is very essential. But then striking that right balance can be very, very hard. Like fully hands-off autonomy is impractical at times because agents can make the mistakes or make unclear decisions. But then if you want to have too much of human in the loop, it can delay the things as well. So that's usually one of the concerns we see. The two things which come up in almost all conversations with our customers is the vendor lock-in and interoperability issues. So as Cam and Tim both mentioned, the AI models and frameworks are changing so fast. So many teams, they want the best of the breed, and they worry that choosing a single vendor's AI agent solution could make them inflexible down the line. And then talking about the multiple kids running around, as Tim mentioned, multi-agent orchestration has its own complexities, right? Because building systems with multiple AI agents collaborate is very tricky, and developers struggle coordinating the agent roles, managing a shared state, and preventing agents from getting stuck in those loops. So the solution to that is definitely a very reliable, proven, trustworthy agentic orchestration layer, which helps address most of these pain points. I would say all of the pain points. It can deliver the controlled agency by improving the agent reliability without compromising the utility and autonomy. It can blend the AI with the human and the bots for better outcomes. And then it also abstracts that multi-agent complexity into a very manageable framework. And then it also avoids that single vendor limitations. So, and as we were talking about Maestro, we released that recently, and that has really been received very well with our customers. I've seen the demo or heard about it. The most common reaction I've got from them is, oh my God, a lot of thought has been put into it for UiPath to develop it. So for us, this agentic orchestration layer is definitely the differentiator for us. It provides that controlled agency, which seamlessly design the end-to-end workflows that includes the agents, the bots, and the people as well. And it helps make us vendor agnostic. We can integrate any agent or automation, either UiPath, the third party, into the workflows, and really orchestrate across multiple systems. And then it also helps with continuous optimization. It provides the full observability of the processes across the systems, the agents, and people, so that you can really have modern-driven process improvements over time.
No, I think, brilliantly said. And I think that's the ultimate goal too. At the end of the day, it's having a modern process improvement strategy, right? And understanding how that works. So I think that's That's perfectly stated. And, you know, the thing that comes to mind as well is that the concerns come from different levels, you know, of or understanding of the people within an organization, right? So the frontline worker that might be interacting with it directly, or the person who's now going to be reacting to an output rather than an aggregation of system, you know, records that they're used to doing. And so the level of change within the different, you know, areas is kind of going to come into play as well in those concerns and questions, and the lens in which they're, you know, kind of, you know, addressing those concerns is from a different place. So Tim, with your role, you have oversight of the technology asks and the digital interests of several different business units. And so when it comes to the requests and the asks, do you find that you have some business units that are more like renegade, like, let's go, I'm ready to go, versus other business units that are like, we like our checklist, like, stop it. You know, and how do you kind of overcome that and get the level of maturity of you know, the technology adoption, this digital, you know, charge that you've been given? How do you kind of spread the love and discern how to kind of address each business unit with their needs?
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of piggyback on what Cameron mentioned earlier, and I think it's a best practice, but I'll leave it up to you guys to decide. At the end of the day, in your world of AI, you need two things. You need a formal AI intake process of some way, shape, or form. How are you going to take in these requests, quantify them, you know, interact with the business partner to identify potential value, you know, kind of rank, prioritize them, because obviously there are a lot of requests these days, and you need some sort of forum to sort of sift through all those. So you need an intake process. And then once you actually are going live with any version of these solutions, you need a governance. And so that governance either requires, you know, legal, regulatory, you know, copyright, training, you name it. And so what I have seen lately is that my CISO has gotten more involved in agentic AI than he may have been involved in traditional AI or even generative AI. Generative AI was really around data privacy. Are we showing anything that we shouldn't be, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And that was more of a legal interest. But with agentic, when you're taking action, when you're orchestrating things and passing and handing off things from one to another, cybersecurity is a huge sort of weigh-in in those conversations and how those might be done, because there isn't anything bigger that would ruin this AI party than a security hack. That would put all of our jobs at jeopardy and ruin all the fun that we're having right now. So I certainly would suggest to involve your cybersecurity folks in as much of this as possible, because although they won't necessarily quantify the business value, they'll make what you're deploying very secure. And with security becomes more use and adoption and value for everybody. So I just wanted to throw that out. What's game changing for us around agentic is that action piece. I saw the definition that Paula showed before, and I certainly don't disagree with the dictionary definition, but to me, agentic means action. And so, you know, the human to human interaction, the human to machine interaction, you're going to have to define that fully for any sort of agentic solution. You're going to have to put to bed that agentic AI is replacing people's jobs. It's not, it's augmenting them. It's helping them become more efficient. And I'll just give an example from one of our workshops that we had recently with our UiPath solution in our customer service area, because most of these requests are coming from customer service. You asked, you know, whether it be very business unit specific. It's not. It's the customer service from each of those areas, from each of our business segments that are coming up with most of these requests. And so one of them recently was to leverage agentic AI in some way, shape, or form to respond to customer inquiries that might come through normal channels. Agentic is a perfect use case for that. Offload that tactical work from a person who's been doing that manually and give that off to a bot, and that will handle that very, very sufficiently. But what if that interaction requires a document? What if it requires a quote? What if it requires a PDF? And so what we saw as we dove deeper into these use cases and moving agentic up the path, if you will, in terms of responsibilities within the customer service set of use cases, and we found UiPath has an awesome solution for document reading, document understanding, and then providing a read up back to that customer based on sort of the summary of that document. So unless you go a few layers deep in terms of the real use case you're trying to solve and the real value. The value of the solution is that document understanding, or the generation of the summary of that document. It wasn't in sort of answering the question from a sort of product. It is going the next level and providing some added intelligence, some sort of layer on top of that that's going to make the interaction with the customer that more valuable, and the likelihood that they do business in that fashion with us that more likely as well. So I just wanted to throw UiPath a little bit of a bone there, because Agentic is providing some game-changing opportunities, mostly in the customer service space.
Yeah, and I think it's contextually important to see where those those sourcing areas are. And so for some organizations who've maybe adopted RPA automation and perhaps the back office, right, tried and true place to start is F&A, and then it's time to move on, and you've been like, oh God, I don't want to install a chatbot that's so annoying, because they've been pretty annoying for the last 10 to 15 years. Now's the time. So that's a really, really ripe for automation area. It's a need. There can be top line revenue depending on the industry and the organization that's involved. If you can monetize an ask rather than having to have a human take that call, that's a win. And then there's even been making your website more transactional, right? And so I love what you said with that, Tim, because we also had our client at Lowe's. One of their biggest use cases was making their website transactional and making sure that things match, from the supply chain there. So I think you're absolutely right. The context of where those are going to come from are going to be critical in understanding what the roadmap is and then what the adoption is, right? So Gartner's going to be scratching their heads for a little bit of what swim lane, is this going to play in? And I think it's capable for all, like we've seen in RPA, right? The technology can be nimble enough to solve many, many use cases. But I think there's going to be some rising stars, and it seems to be falling into customer interaction, employee engagement, data, collating, questions on policy, legal reviews, things like that it's like my eyeballs would start bleeding looking at all the documents to ingest and then get it to go, right? That's what a machine's for. So it's really just personifying the machine along the way with how that goes. So speaking of use cases, and I took them out of the deck intentionally, but for everybody, I know you guys, we've gotten comments of people saying, thank you for the use cases. So I will stick them in the deck that I send along, but I wanted to save some of the use cases for the discussion, the use case discussion for the discussion. And so Sangeeta, I'm going to turn to you again. As we've talked about, many tools can do many different jobs, and then finding kind of that area that's ripe makes the most sense. So in the agentic world, as we're here to talk about, agentic, where are the use cases, where are the critical, kind of areas that you've seen customers say, light bulb went off. This is where we want to kind of start.
Absolutely. So the possibilities are huge, right? Yeah. Like once the customers know what agents can do for them, like it's really amazing to see how many ideas can come. Let me share about a couple of use cases which I think are just applicable in every organization, every role, irrespective of whatever industry it is. So this is actually one of our most innovative customers, Vex. They started really small, but it ended up being such an impactful agent. So their sales teams were spending too much time navigating the scattered customer data across multiple systems and sources. So the internal CRMs, the public filings, you name it, it's all over. And this fragmentation made it very tough to prep for the meetings, that tailor the messaging, or drive the strategic conversations. So what Vex did was they deployed UiPath agents to pull together, contextualize, and present relevant insights for specific customer engagements. So for example, like conferences or sales call, and this dramatically reduced the prep time and enabled meaningful personalized interactions. And this is one of my favorite use cases because you can really implement it anywhere. Like in customer success space, like my team could use it because we have so many executive briefings and the customer data is sitting out everywhere in Slack and Outbox and everywhere out there. And the impact can be huge. It can really increase the operational efficiency. The employees are better equipped and the customers really feel the difference. So it's a win-win on both sides. Another use case which has gelling very well with financial institutions, which is my focus area, is KYC, know your customer. So financial institutions, they face mounting operational drag when it comes to onboarding new clients, right? Originating loans or opening the accounts. Like these journeys are filled with so much of redundant data entry. There's a lot of manual document validation, and then there are a lot of disjointed systems for hands-off. And agents can do such a remarkable job there. Agentic automation can tackle these inefficiencies very amazingly. In commercial client onboarding, for example, intelligent agents can extract and validate the KYC documents. They can launch screening workflows and really assemble the onboarding packs, which can reduce the onboarding time significantly as high as 50%. Um, in lending operations, the agents can compile income and collateral information from the unstructured files. They can monitor the SLAs and route applications for a faster decisioning. So, and even in account opening, the agents autofill forms using prior customer data, validate the IDs, and sync information with core systems. So there's so much of application everywhere. Onboarding, KYC, that's something which is really working very well with my customers for sure.
No, I think that's so important to note. And I think, what's really exciting is, and we have this concept too, and Cam, I'll kick it over to you, but as the agentic use cases kind of bubble up, we've seen this in the different iterations of how, emerging technologies have gone over the years. You adopt, you understand where it goes, and then companies create solutions, that do that because it's been asked for so many times that, while, Tim might be manufacturing and, somebody else might be retail, it doesn't matter because the pattern of paying an invoice is the pattern of paying an invoice.
Exactly.
Right. And so point A to point B of a reconciliation is that the things match. Right. And so at the end, it's like when you actually simplify these processes that people have been stumbling over to streamline, it's really exciting that we are on the precipice of an adoption that ultimately will kind of streamline all of these things, take things from the past, begin to replace some of the systems that didn't work, or just modernize, the interaction between mainframes even, to a place that actually gets to your customers in a way that's reliable, that's mobile, that's accessible, that's understandable. And so Cam, let's talk just a little bit about some of the pre-built solutions, the exciting launch that we have of some of the agentic capabilities that now our little agents are going to be running, in our customer site. So let's give a little quick preview on that. And then Tim, I'll turn to you too, because we have a follow-up question for you.
Okay.
So Cam, a little bit about the pre-built concept and why we think this is where agentic is going.
Yeah, absolutely, Paula. And I think I mentioned this briefly earlier, but one of the keys that I really like to discuss with agents is specialization, meaning they are designed to perform a specific task and perform that task very well. We're seeing this in some of these very niche vertical agents that are being released by companies all over the world, whether it be for legal tech, med tech. You're seeing it even in insurance, just very tactically deployed agents or agentic solutions for these. And as we're looking at our solutions now, our pre-built solutions, right? Whether that be invoice processing, Paula, you already mentioned reconciliation. I think we see the clear benefits that these agents and these AI tools bring to the data analysis component, and even extract, transform, and load, our ETL essentials tool, right? We can use these tools in different ways, whether it be to help you actually set up and deploy these solutions. We're already seeing, UiPath doing this with something like Autopilot, but it can also be in the actual analysis of the data. I think, Tim, you mentioned how you're using one of these tools to actually provide a summary, right? As I see it with our solutions, data acquisition is a very static ABC process. I don't need to probabilistically go grab a file that I know is going to be there every day at a certain time. We can always use RPA for that. But generating a summary that's intuitive, that speaks to you as a person, that is a perfect use case for RPA. And so I think as we approach this agentically, right, it's where do all of these fit in and how do we do it? So we're not just, taking the circle to the square and, putting that peg home. It's how do we do this well? How do we do it correctly? How do we do it efficiently from a cost and value perspective?
Yes, no, absolutely. And I think that's what we're seeing in general, right? The balance of the cost value, the projection of the time, my license are up for renewal. What do I swap? What do I think
Right.
of? What am I supposed to add? Like those are the kind of tactical questions that are coming our way. And ultimately we're really seeing that people are kind of doing a blended, approach to it. And UiPath, like we can't give you kudos enough for being so helpful with these workshops because it's really helped accelerate the awareness because we don't have time like we did 12 years ago when RPA came out or hit America because Europe was, well, my friends will probably argue with me on that one, on that statement, but really when it was enterprise adoption, right, Sangeeta?
Yeah. I'll just talk a little bit about our Build Agent workshop. That has been a game changer to really bring up to speed and really create the excitement.
Please do.
Yeah, so our feature agent builder, like it's a low code guided experience for users to build and evaluate and publish agents. So we have been doing a lot of build your agent kind of workshops where just within an hour or two, the participants really walk out with agents already deployed. So we have been doing a lot of this build your agent workshops, which is hands-on immersive sessions where we partner with our customers and co-create the purpose-built AI agents using this agent builder. It's a very strategic workshop where we identify high-value business case and we really define the agent's work behavior, the objective, environment, and then leverage the agent builder to visualize the design, the test, and refine the agent's workflows as well. And it's just so amazing that within an hour or two, the customers feel so empowered. They walk out with the deployed prototype agent. They have a clear vision of the value hypothesis and a blueprint to scale. So it's so powerful because it accelerates the adoption, to your point, because once they have seen it, they have made it themselves, they really move from AI sounds cool to, oh my God, AI is going to solve my problem and I can do it.
Yes. No, it's a believer boot camp. I mean, it really is. It's the thing that you're saying ultimately turns out, and you get to go home with an agent, right? It's almost like you get a prize at the end of it. But it has shown a lot of success, and some of the feedback that we've gotten, we'll be sending signups after this webinar as well, for more of these sessions because it's really been very, very heavily demanded. And we've been talking about this for just a short 3 or 4 months. So we've got about 10 minutes left. If there's any questions, please send them in the chat. I've got a few left from the registration that I haven't gone through. But Tim, I wanted to do a quick how it started, how it's going with you. We talked about agentic conceptually. It was like, oh, it's this thing that's coming and, there's a launch in April and we're all, kind of going around it, but everybody has agents. What are we going to do? Right. And we talked a little bit about what you had coming up in the form of the sales kickoff. So tell us a little bit now that we're past the sales kickoff. How did things go? How was the reception? And what do you guys have on the horizon for the next 6 months before we check in again?
Yeah, I would say that people, for a 50-year-old industrial manufacturing company, I think they've embraced and have sort of put their arms around AI and generative and agentic AI pretty well. I had my doubts, I would admit early on, but now having seen it, them having witnessed it, and obviously every employee participating in some usage of it, I think has really sort of turned people for the company. So that has been awesome. I will say though that the future is bright, and the possibility of these solutions really being deployed and solving business problems is very evident. And so I would encourage everyone to not think of AI or agentic as playground or proving points or things like that. You have to come to the table with real life use cases. We have engineering use cases that we're piloting right now. We have financial performance and decision-making use cases. I mentioned Ava earlier, and that's what that solution intends to solve. We have customer interaction and quoting solutions being deployed right now. So when you talk about sort of core practices and aspects of your business with agentic potentially augmenting or replacing some of those traditional processes, that's pretty cool. Yeah. And so with that becomes, new roles for folks. There are agentic architects now. There are roles that didn't exist a year ago that people are sort of sliding into as a result of the work that they've done just within the past year, which I think is cool, as the talent landscape is changing to match up to this technology as well. So it really is a game changer, I believe. It has been for me so far, and luckily the company has embraced it because we want to do more. And so I look forward to sharing more of those successes and wins as we move forward here.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Tim. And Cam, any final thoughts that you leave with anybody as they're kind of thinking through getting started, to agentify or not to agentify? What would you leave as parting words?
Yeah, thanks, Paula. I think we are on a path to agents being a part of our daily work lives, one way or another, whether that's internal at your company or through a company that you are interacting with now. I would strongly encourage you to think about the policies and think about where this can help you most, because it's coming, but also pick and choose your spots. Not everything needs to be an agent. Not everything needs to be AI. Not everything needs to be RPA either, right? There is still very much a human component in these tools, and determining how you are going to work with this technology is the first most important thing that you can do today, so that tomorrow you can figure out how to take advantage of it.
Well said. No, I totally agree. And Cam is one of the leaders of our boot camp. So maybe somebody will get lucky and they'll get Sangeeta and Cam as a team up. I'd love to be at that session. Sangeeta, so your parting words as we kind of think through all these concepts that we've talked through today. What would you leave as kind of a final think through advice from the field for our listeners?
Absolutely. So agents are here. Agents are not taking your jobs. They are just going to amplify your capabilities, your life. So I would encourage everybody to let the creative juices flow and see how exactly you can create your own agents to simplify your work. We recently had a hackathon at UiPath where our teams actually developed agents for themselves for the day-to-day stuff. And it was just so amazing how it can make our lives easier. So definitely encourage everybody to get the creative juices flowing and think how they can leverage AI agents in their day-to-day life as well.
I agree. And stay curious. Follow Wonderbots. We have several new articles and concepts coming out. And then we have a few events where we're actually showcasing some of the ways that Agentic is being adopted over the next several months. And I will give a little bit of a teaser that our CEO has actually been working on a white paper that he'll be releasing very soon as well, too. So we're very excited about that. Connect with our panelists. For everybody that's on the call, we will be sending the deck along. We will be doing this roughly the same time, roughly the same place this coming month as we do these webinars series every month. If you guys have any topics of interest that you'd like us to discuss, please send them along to bd@wonderbots.com. Thanks again to my panelists. It was an exciting discussion, as always. I can't wait to see what happens in 2 months. We are exponentially, racing through this journey at this point. And so everything changes all the time, and never a dull moment in our industry. So thanks again, guys, for joining me. Thanks for everybody who hung around, and we'll be sending the follow-ups in a couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.